Lucille Ball, quite possibly the world's most beloved redhead, has of late been touted as the savior of Star Trek. But what was Lucy's actual involvement with Star Trek the original series? Well, today we'll find out. Hello and welcome to Backtrek, a web series that focuses on the background information of any given topic in Star Trek. In this episode, we're taking a look at the amazing Lucille Ball to better understand her place in Star Trek history. I love Lucy. No, really, I'm a huge Lucille Ball fan. I always have been, and so are many other Star Trek fans. So when social media began recently to pick up the threads of Lucy's involvement with Star Trek the original series, I decided to do a bit more of a deep dive on the topic. Most people are aware that TOS was made at Desilu, the studio which was founded in 1950 that would make the popular and iconic sitcom I Love Lucy. But by the early 1960s, Desilu was facing some serious financial problems. With her sitcom ended and filing for divorce from Desi Arnaz in 1960, Lucille Ball had made the unprecedented decision to buy her ex-husband out and become sole owner of Desilu. This made Lucille Ball the first woman ever to head up a major studio. The studio would enjoy a few television successes such as Mission Impossible and Mannix, but overall the studio was hemorrhaging money at Warp Factor 9, causing the studio to invest in less programming, which in turn would make the situation worse when those programs were not picked up by the networks. Lucy's involvement in the day-to-day running of the studio was actually quite minimal in the early 60s. Having gotten remarried to a comedian named Gary Morton in 1961, she would gladly leave all those annoying little tasks to her new husband to look after. Unfortunately, Morton was inept himself at running the studio, further compounding Desilu's financial issues. Eventually, this led Lucy to hire Oscar Katz and Herb Solow to search through the galaxy for any interesting concepts that could become a hit show that could save Desilu. Of course, it's here that Gene Roddenberry enters the story, pitching Herb a Wagon Train to the Stars series idea that he called Star Trek. Getting the go-ahead to produce Star Trek, Desilu eventually landed a deal with NBC for the show, after making a second Star Trek pilot called Where No Man Has Gone Before. But even though the deal had been signed, Desilu's board of directors weren't too keen on the idea, feeling it would stretch such a small studio like Desilu's budget way too far. And so let's let Herb Solow, the vice president of programming for Desilu, tell us himself what happened next during a board of directors meeting in the mid-1960s.
Although I wasn't a member of the Desilu board of directors, I was called upon to make appearances at board meetings to report on and update our series development status, network deals, important casting choices we've made, and the like. Lucille Ball rarely asked questions during the meeting, content to listen to her executives discuss the state of her company. Surprisingly, at one particular meeting, as I was about to begin my presentation, Lucy interrupted me. "Herb? Lucy? Herb, what's happening with that South Seas series?" "The what?" "You know, Herb, that South Seas series you mentioned last time." "South Seas series? Gee, Lucy, I wish I could remember, but I don't recall any South Seas series. Are you sure?" "Herb," Lucy interrupted, a slight anger sounding in her tone, "of course you talked about the South Seas series, with the USO entertainers who went there during the war to visit the troops." I looked around the room. The faces of the board members weren't happy. Mickey Rudin, Lucy's attorney and my support system at Desilu, silently indicated for me to answer her question. I tried to be calm as Lucy was getting more and more upset. "Lucy, perhaps it's something I've forgotten, but for the life of me, I do not recall ever mentioning a series we have in development about a group of USO entertainers visiting our troops in the South Seas during World War II. "Oh, yes, you did," now a defiant Lucy said. "Oh, yes, you did." I stood speechless, trying for the life of me to remember what I'd obviously forgotten, when Lucy, having remembered more information on the subject, suddenly blurted out, "Oh, yes you did, Herb. You called it Star Trek." Later, out of hearing of the others, I explained Star Trek to Lucy, and I realized what an honest and human mistake she'd made. After all, in Lucille Ball's world, a Star Trek could only mean movie stars traveling somewhere in the world for the USO to visit our troops. The South Seas was as good a place as any.
After his explanation to Lucy of the series, she, who had the ability to override any of the board's decisions, gave Herb Solo the go-ahead to make Star Trek with a simple nod. And of course, the rest became history. So it's clear that yes, Lucy saved Star Trek. Without her, we wouldn't have Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, or the Starship Enterprise to inspire us and move us to attempt to make a better world. But the truth is, Lucy's involvement with Star Trek was actually quite minor. For her, it was a business decision. Nothing more, nothing less. And yet for us Star Trek fans, it was so much more. Lucille Ball sold Desilu to the Gulf and Western Company on July 27, 1967. And Gulf and Western, which had also bought Desilu's neighbor Paramount Studios, would combine the two lots and set up the framework for Paramount that is still in place today. And they would also make a fortune off of Star Trek. A fortune that would continue to grow long after Star Trek the original series had been cancelled. As for Lucille Ball, she rarely discussed Desilu, and discussed Star Trek even less after selling her company. Through interviews and little snippets she gave over the years, she made it clear that Desilu had represented a low point in her personal life, and Lucy, who was a forward, onward and upward type of individual, would refuse to dwell on any experience that was negative. Lucille Ball died on April 26, 1989, from an aneurysm combined with heart disease. She was 77. And although it may have been just a business decision for the lovable redhead, one thing is certain. Star Trek would not exist without her. And that, good Trinaries, is the real story. Thank you for watching today's episode of Backtrack. What do you think of Lucille Ball? Are you a big fan of hers like I am? Do you have any topics that you'd like me to do a deep dive into for you? Well, leave your comments in the section below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, hitting that little bell icon so you won't miss a single video we release. Want to help the channel find its own Lucy to love? Then consider becoming a channel patron. A major help which allows this channel to buy resources and 3D models to keep it going. The link to our Patreon account is in the description below. Thanks again for watching. Live long and prosper.